Welcome to the Weather Report, hosted by Yorgo Lykouria, founder of Rainlight Studio. Today we are joined by Victoria Milne, a creative thinker who through consultancy 6 Cent works at the intersection of design, government development, public space and art.
So today we're going to talk about public space, or what in the UK we call the public realm. And I just wanted to start with a quote from Spiro Kostov, actually. I think you know him. So he says, "Within the dense press of the built fabric, the greatest luxury of all is empty space." And yet it's actually quite astonishing that we still have to vie for empty space in, the metropolises of today, even though we know the benefits of it to people, to society. And while there's a lot of talk and theorizing about it, I mean, I think for me, it just comes to very simply the idea of beauty, of the idea of creating spaces that create the possibilities for beauty to exist, for a poetic encounter, in the crush of everyday life. So I just want to, today we're going to talk about public space because you have vast experience in the topic, and particularly, from a very interesting point of view of the one who actually affects change, I think, in a place like New York City. And I think that's really fascinating. So what is your quest? What do you want to accomplish when it comes to public space?
Thank you for that. Good question. Well, I think there are kind of two different parts of the question. There's public space is shared space, so it can be indoors or it could be outdoors. But to me, there's a very important kind of democratic message about public space, because it's shared. I think government and public entities have an obligation and an opportunity to establish a standard of engagement and of meaning and of respect through the kind of public spaces that they provide. So when you, for instance, provide a public space that's very defensive, where everything is polished stainless steel and the chairs are bolted down, it's a message about defensiveness, about protection from others, about hardness in the world, mistrust. And I think we have an opportunity when you have a public space manager that has the bandwidth, and it's not always only money, it can also be just a willingness to take risks, actually, or sometimes to overrule their insurance broker, to say, I really want to have this swing in public. Because, I mean, in America, we're so much more litigation focused, I think, than everywhere else. But there is a big difference between entities who want to make a commitment to what's humane in an environment, and sometimes that is the less durable, the less hard, the more joyful, the more playful, the more open thing. I mean, when I've been working with Times Square, and they are very eager to create an engaging experience there, and it makes a big difference.
So where do you think the real challenge is? Do you think that, as you describe, the kind of bolted down furniture and the stainless materials of every kind, that kind of indestructibility, it's almost like public space becomes an extension of institutions rather than an extension of culture, right? We talk about when we had a first conversation, you had this a beautiful statement about the idea of space shaping us, right? And how
yes, yeah. I think that the choice of materials and the decisions about the built environment, but in particular the public environment, I think they define levels of trust. They define levels of expectation of behavior and cues of behavior. An extreme example is sometimes in New York, you have kids who have to walk through metal detectors to go to school. And to me, it's a part of the built environment that's communicating that people can't be trusted, that the world is dangerous, that you may not be trustworthy, and the people around you aren't trustworthy. That's an extreme example, but a more subtle example that takes place in design is the first time I went on the tube in London. I saw the seats had textile upholstery on them.
Yeah.
My mind was blown because it was in New York, they're all hard. They're hard plastic shells. And the textile upholstery to me communicated such well, I mean, there's some elegance is some of it, but it really also has to do with domesticity, friendliness, trust, willingness to clean, I mean, it speaks to a different level of expectation for what the public is going to be. And I think that the environment that you provide cues people to the behavior that you expect there. And when you provide a durable, defensive, mistrusting environment, it's a cue.
Yeah,
I think it's important. And the alternative is you have the opportunity and I think obligation in public space to exemplify good civic space and good civic values. And I think that good civic values are manifest through the built environment and cued when you show respect for the public, when you provide resources, when you make a space not just beautiful but in some ways generous. I think it resounds positively through that, because all public spaces are equitable, right? Yeah. I mean, they're shared by everyone. They're not, even if the design is elitist and very beautiful, like for instance in New York, the memorial on Roosevelt Island is exquisite and it's open to everyone. So I really think that there is a huge opportunity there for recognizing the democratic values that get expressed with public space.
Yeah, since we kind of were brushing on these ideas of the difference between Europe and America, apart from the age, I think if you look at most European cities, they tend to be heavily populated, and they have been for a long time. So most people live in an apartment, and you don't have that much space. You don't have a garden, and so to make life livable, you get the birth of the public square, right? And every neighborhood has a public space of some kind, and people use it. It's like the living room. That's where you hang out at night, after dinner or whatever, and the kids run around and play. In America, there's a different concept about life, which is the idea of, the American dream, right? Where you have your house and you have your garden, your picket fence, and your driveway, your car, and all that sort of separation from society, right? But yet, in America, parallel to the American dream, you also have the old European standard of the very high populated big city like New York, like Boston, like Chicago, like Atlanta, Los Angeles. And so it's a bit of a maybe confrontation somehow, that the two ideals of life are contradicting each other somehow. I don't know.
Well, it's interesting. I think what you're touching on is also related to an increasingly digital world that we have now, where people don't, for instance, in Italian towns, they famously go strolling outdoors after dinner. Yeah. And increasingly now we go indoors and look at our screens, which we're doing right now, actually.
Yeah.
I don't know I do think that Europe has a much stronger, that the public space is a stronger element in European traditions and ways of living. I think it's sad, actually, that Americans have less of that. I mean, tragically, you might say that the mall is the one that took the place of that, and those are all dying across the whole country. Yeah, I think it's something that we need to enrich our lives with here more.
You make me think about something from Jane Jacobs, the Death and Life of Great American Cities. She talks about eyes on the street. And, I was speaking to another New Yorker about what's happening in New York right now, and the idea that, and I don't know, I haven't seen it firsthand, but the idea that people are more afraid of being in the streets, that there's a kind of rise in crime rates. And, it makes me think that the kind of hyper digitization that we're experiencing now, and there are proponents of perpetuating that idea that we should keep working from home, I think it's just going to be the death of the public space, public realm, because the minute you don't have eyes on the street, according to Jane Jacobs, people, you lose that kind of proprietorship of, the ownership of the street that society has. Then the street doesn't belong to anybody because it's empty. And then it becomes a kind of no man's land, and it's a wasteland, a void, and that's all the kind of terrible dystopian sort of nightmares that come true, in that sort of very dangerous realm that you dare not go into. So, it seems to me that the digitalization that we're going through might be working counter to a successful public realm as well, actually.
I am nowhere near as dystopian as you are. And in fact, in that respect, I don't know about the rest of your life, but I actually feel as though COVID has been an enormous reminder of how much we need each other and how much we need to be together, and how impoverished our worlds are when we don't have communal space together. Yeah. And I think that as we worldwide, as we ease up, there's going to be a huge outpouring of just love for being together, for communality, for having public space, for aggregating and having the energy of a city and being with the other people. I was after very, very few trips into Manhattan in the last year, I was in the other day, and I was actually just thrilled. I was thrilled to see all the people and all the different people in the crowds. Yeah. And I feel as though there's going to be a huge return with love and enthusiasm to see other people.
No, I agree with you, and I'm not dystopian. I'm not dystopian because I also am kind of thrilled about the idea of coming back to real life. And I think you're right. We've been starved of each other, right? And all this time, and to be fair, in London, you're seeing public spaces being used a lot more than they have been. So in fact, people are getting out. So I guess I'm touching on maybe something different, which is the idea of people just leaving the city, and that's a different problem. But or the idea that businesses will leave the cities, right, and then leave a vacuum of some kind, and things. Well, it happened to Detroit, right?
Yeah, I that is another thing that I did see in New York. That I was in Midtown, which is full of office buildings. I mean, obviously everyone knows that, but in light of COVID, I was walking among them realizing they were empty. And I felt I felt like I was just thinking of the embodied capital, the amount of capital to build one office building. And here you're in a forest of office buildings, realizing how much, money is a symbol of all the other energies, but it's how much capital is in these buildings, and they're empty and they're unused and they may never be refilled, and realize, and I felt I was seeing the physical manifestation of one of these epochal shifts. Like if you could see the housing crisis in America when it happened. I was looking at these buildings and I was recognizing they were empty and feeling the historic imbalance of that level of investment in a space and it being unused. And I don't know what the impact of that is going to be, but it's a grave imbalance. And that is something that is going to affect us, no doubt.
It's a great term, the idea of embodied capital. We always talk about embodied carbon. The idea of embodied capital is a Hoover Dam of dosh just waiting to kind of erupt.
Yeah, but I mean, if money is a symbol of the energies of people. It's also the resources of the earth. You know, it's money that sits there, but all of that money is also a symbol of all the other things that could have been done with it besides building an office building. You know, that money could have done so many other things, and here it is sitting there captive in that form of an empty office building that may not be refilled. You know?
And what you're saying really points to the idea that what society loves or what society values is where they put their money, right? In other words, if we're after making more money, we're going to put our money into making more money. If we're after creating a harmonious and balanced and happy society, we're going to put our money, you know. So do you think that there's, and maybe as a result of the pandemic, I mean, do you think that we might see a shift towards renewed values? Or do you think that, and if not, do you think that there's a way for us to kind of move things in that direction? And how could we do that? Because it seems like at least the people that we talk to, you know, are all, because we're all in the same place of we're trying to make society better, whether through policy, through influence, through design, through our ideas. You know, we're trying to leave a mark, a trace of ourselves on our times where we can say, well, we did our best and we made society a little bit better during the time that we were here, right? How do you think, you know, because you've had that frontline experience for so long of, you know, having to convince people basically, right, to do beautiful things, let's say, right? So what do you think about that? How do we move forward? How do we start moving things in the right direction again?
I feel that that one of the things that is happening here that is related to public space, but also to our communal life, is the political activism that's happening across America. Is certainly important and is resulting from this period in time. And I think that the public space is essential to the political action, right? It's us coming together physically, symbolically, emotionally, politically, to say this is a communal thing that we value and we want. So the Black Lives Matter, for example, but as well as all kinds of other political action that we've been having here, is essentially a public expression of communal will that doesn't happen on Zoom or Instagram, or it happens on streets. It happens in the shared space. And so I think that's at least in the US, I think we're experiencing a pretty powerful change in that direction. I think I may be not exactly addressing your question.
Oh, no, it's okay. You don't have to. You could ignore my questions. It's fine. We're just talking, you know. Yeah, no, it's fine.
But I think, well, I mean, just to build on that, I do think, I think there is something profound about public space that we're gathering from this period, though. You know, that the cost of COVID is being together. And that's a recognition. That's a really important part of our lives that maybe we hadn't thought enough about is
Yeah.
that being together is a really important value, and
Yeah.
it's something that we need to plan for and uphold as a treasure.
Yeah.
You know.
So, could we talk a little bit about Times Square, the amazing things you've been doing there? Yeah. I won't ask any questions. Just tell us about it.
Okay. My client for Times Square is the Times Square Alliance, which is it's called a BID, a Business Improvement District. It's a nonprofit. It's a structure for nonprofits that is throughout New York, in which a map, there's a mapped boundary within which a tax is levied that goes to support improvements in that business district. And so the Times Square Alliance is obviously a very important one. And they have been really innovative leaders in both celebrating their business community, but then also trying to bring culture and activity and life to Times Square and kind of multiply the already overwhelming effect of Times Square and tell stories through the space. And there's a lot of marketing. There's a lot of large corporations with voices in Times Square. But what the Alliance wanted to do was create a stronger connection to what some of New York City's own culture, which includes designers and design creatives, things like that. And simultaneously, they had a hard time meeting some of their needs with products that were on the market. So they talked to me about it, and I started the Times Square Design Lab for them. And the idea of that was to take these needs that were identified by the Times Square Alliance and go to develop scopes and take those to New York City designers and have them design new public space furnishings that we would then prototype on the plaza. And we started that in 2018 with 5 designs. And so there are lots of other parts before I get into those designs. One thing is that we would be using the platform of the plaza to be a live lab, to be a prototyping space, have people come and engage, give us feedback, see what works, see what doesn't work. And aside, while doing that, also provide cultural content. Here's how design works. One of the things I always like to say is that I think the pedestrians think that public space is sort of naturally occurring. They don't really recognize decisions have been made, designs have been thought through, people are creating this for you. It could be this way or it could be that way. Here's a design process, wake up, public space belongs to you and is a created thing. Think about how it's created. So it became both a way of refining product as well as providing a cultural story to visitors to the plaza. And then the long-term goal is for those products that are successful there to be licensed under our brand to manufacturers to be sold to other plazas. And then if we get royalties on those, we pass some of the royalty on to the designer and use some of it to subsidize the program.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's really been terrific. I mean, it's small but it's really been very rewarding, and it's taken a lot of different directions. We ended up working with Sasha Maktik in Ljubljana, who had designed this incredible K67 kiosk, which he designed in 1966 in what was then Yugoslavia, and it was an icon all over Eastern Europe because Yugoslavia could sell behind the Iron Curtain.
Yeah.
And apparently every public square had this little news kiosk in it. And I talked to someone from Warsaw, and they were saying that for them, that news kiosk was like a portal to another world, because you could go get cigarettes and magazines. You learn about the rest of the world through there, and it was in every public square. Anyway, so we restored one and brought it to Times Square from Yugoslavia, and I think it's as far as I know, I think it's the first one really in use in North America. So that's been really fun. MoMA had one on the street, but they were sort of exhibiting it. So we've had lots of cool adventures in what you can do in public space.
Really, really great symbols. I mean, is this something that, the kind of structure and the support for the Times Square Alliance from the businesses in that district, is that something that's happening in different areas in New York or in different cities in America, or is that unique to Times Square?
No, the structure of a BID, a business improvement district, is they have them all over New York. There's the Downtown Alliance and a garment district. They have them all over New York. I'm a member of the International Downtown Association, and that is a place in which the category is really called public space managers, and typically they are nonprofits. They're not always called a BID, but they have different forms in different cities, but and also in Europe as well. So it's a pretty something that everyone doesn't use the exact same tax structure or nonprofit structure, but it's a pretty common thing to have dedicated public space managers.
It's I just have this. Maybe it's a crazy idea, but in the 20s, 30s, New York was putting up towers, and each tower represented a great corporation, Chrysler Building, and so on. And in the 50s and 60s, that all kind of stopped, right? I think with the Seagrams was probably one of the last. And this idea, yeah, and then the idea of the corporate icon sort of went away, and it became, you're better off getting a 30-second spot during the Super Bowl, and that would be a better way to, mark your presence in the culture than putting up a tower, and it probably costs as much. I don't know. But, I just wonder, if we talk about the idea of public space being precious, a real luxury, could you imagine where corporations are buying city blocks and taking it down to create a public space, so they're leaving? It's never going to happen, I know, but it's this idea of, it's kind of the creating the negative of the tower, right? Of the idea of demarcating a public space, and then similar to the what happened in London, where the lords would bequeath their estates to the culture, to the city. This could be quite a beautiful way for corporations to have a huge impact in cultural life, similar to Times Square, and create a real, if we're talking about corporate social responsibility and benevolent capitalism, those are all really big, important ideas. I think there's some, maybe we need more visions, more ideas about how that, as you say, embodied wealth, embodied capital could start to become something that makes a real positive change in society and gives something back to the city, and helps us belong to it more, so we're not separate from it or from each other, but we have a place where we can belong together. I don't know. Yeah. Just a thought. Yeah. Is that possible? You think that'll ever happen?
Well, I mean, it makes me think of a couple of things. One is your story of the lords and ladies who donated the parks to London. I mean, the corporations, at least in America, the corporations are the lords and ladies now.
Yeah.
There are some gardens that I know of that are donated. Like there's an Eli Lilly garden that's from the family that started the pharmaceutical company. That's not New York City. I mean, conceptually, the idea of tearing down a building like that and putting in a garden is It just kind of blows my mind. But it also makes it also makes me think of I actually live out in Brooklyn near an IKEA, and I'm sure that it's a byproduct of the city's zoning negotiations with the building. But there's a beautiful park that IKEA maintains all around it on the water that is actually a really valuable public amenity.
Amazing.
That really is probably only able to be leveraged when the value of the property is low. So doing that in New York City, I mean, we're going to have a really, really different economy when the time comes that that's feasible for anyone to do, but it's interesting.
So what's next? What do you think is next for you? I mean, in terms of next projects, your ambitions for New York, for enhancing the public realm?
I think there's a lot of opportunity for celebrating, supporting public speech. It just feels like that's the thing of the moment. I mean, you want to celebrate public speech in a way that is also inclusive of people who may not agree with me, unfortunately.
Well, like Voltaire said, right? I may not agree with what you're saying, but I will die to protect your right to say it, or something like that, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's an important thing, especially right now. I mean, in the US, we have a lot of healing to do. And public space is a place where I think there's an opportunity to bring people with different views together in a way that's supportive, and I hope can participate in the healing. One thing that happens is you end up with communities that are all one political view or all one religious view, and public space is the place where those things break down. And I think there's a huge opportunity there to help create safe differences so that we can be more respectful and understand what we have in common.
It's been absolutely brilliant speaking with you today.
Oh, great.
If there's anything we haven't touched on that you'd like to finish up with, you can take the floor again. Do
you have any work related to public space that you want to talk about that I could hear about?
Well, a little bit, yeah. I designed with my team. We designed some public space elements for a project in Qatar, Lusail city. It's a new city. What's interesting about this is that, the ideas of the public realm are built into the fabric. So, typically what happens, especially when you see what's happening in China and India, where they're building cities. I mean, cities for millions of people, like, straight out of the ground, right? It seems to me that they're being done in a very functional way. There's no consideration for humanity. It's being done from the perspective of infrastructure leading the design. So we're designing a machine, right? And even the buildings within it. And I think that we're far too far along to be thinking like that these days. I mean, there's no reason why you cannot build humane cities as quick as you will inhumane cities. It's just an intention, I think. So you need to have more voices in the room that will protect what the city means and what it's really for. So what's quite beautiful about Lusail, and you might say it's an elitist place, and it totally is. I mean, it's for a very I would say privileged population. Nonetheless, we are creating really quite beautiful elements for the city. These lovely lighting elements and seating elements of various kind, and they're all linked thematically to something which comes from the culture, which is a symbol of the oryx horn, and we riffed off this idea to create lots of different elements, and including digital elements which are connecting us to the world. And it has a very dense infrastructure beneath the ground that you don't see, of course, but everything that happens above ground is all really quite human. So that was really wonderful. And this is where, I mean, I've always been interested in cities because cities and architecture, they really go together. And my background is architecture. And so when you design a building, you're adding a piece to the puzzle. So you need to know something about cities. And I think to be an architect, you need to love cities as well, you know, because you're contributing. I always believe that your client is not the only client. You have a lot of clients who are just walking down the street. So you're serving a much wider clientele, actually, with everything you do, even doing a chair, you know. So yeah, so that was an interesting project, and I would love to do more because I very much agree with you that, you know, the idea of how the environment shapes us, our emotions, our thoughts, our values, our beliefs. You know, it's just like if you hear bad news, it affects you, or if you hear good news, it affects you. I think that public spaces should embody joy, you know, embodied carbon, embodied capital, embodied joy, right? And that's what I think architecture needs to be. It needs to give that back, that sense of optimism, because if you have optimism in a culture, you will achieve great things. You will believe in the impossible. The idea of raising a city block to create a beautiful park, right? So, yeah, and hope, you know, I hope we can maybe do something together one day, because I completely subscribe to your ethos and your values and your passion. I can see that you're very passionate about the city, and I wish you every success and strength to carry your mission forward and just do great things in the future.
Well, thanks so much. It's great to connect with you.
You too. Okay, be well.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.